Good morning. We're all here today at Mayor Commission Work Session. It's May 21st, 2012. It is 10:08. The first item on the agenda is a water presentation. Mr. Hanks.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. David Hanks, Public Utilities Director. Today we're going to be doing a presentation concerning our drought management and long-term water supply plans. We do have some introductions to make here. We have a lot of, we have staff, we have consultants. We also have Ms. Sharon Trost, who is the Director of Regulation for South Florida Water Management District here. Mr. Bob Brown, who is the Deputy Executive Manager, is on his way and he should be here shortly. We also have quite a few members of our Water Catchment Advisory Committee in attendance, and also our Water Advisory Board. So I appreciate those folks showing up to show their support for our plans. We also have Ms. Luna Phillips, who is an attorney with Gunster Law Firm, who we hired to help us through this process, and she is over on the left here. We also have Mr. Jim Anderson, who is a professional geologist, JLA Geosciences, who has over 20 years experience. His firm did the modeling for us for all our hydrological data. Dr. Paul Stout, who also is with JLA Geosciences, is in attendance. He also has over 20 years experience in the field. Mr. Gary Gruber, who is with Mock Roos and Associates, a professional engineer who has spent a lot of time and effort helping us do these plans and also submitting our consumptive use modification and other permit requirements. He's in attendance. He has over 13 years professional experience. Mr. G.J. Shares, who is with MWH Global. He is one of the project managers for our water resources and our water treatment plant project, who has also played a vital role in getting these plans together. And Mr. Shares has over 20 years experience in the engineering field. We also have Mr. Mark McNeil, who is with ASR-US. He has been our primary project manager for the ASR well project. Mr. McNeil has over 27 years professional experience dealing with ASR wells and permitting wells in Florida. And Ms. Becky Hackenberg, who is also with MWH Global. She is a professional engineer who has over 16 years experience in the engineering field and has been one of the primaries on not only our water treatment plant, but our overall water resources process. We also have Mr. Tom Biggs, who is also with Mock Roos. A professional engineer who has played a vital part in a lot of the things we do, in particular the AWT, the Advanced Wastewater Treatment facility that we have, and looking at changing that into a more reclaimed water facility. Mr. Biggs also has more than 20 years professional experience as an engineer. Today, Ms. Hackenberg is actually going to be doing the presentation. She will be discussing our drought management plan, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Also, at any time, if you have any questions, we do have a Q&A session at the end, but if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask. Ms. Hackenberg.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for having me here today. As David said, my name is Becky Hackenberg with MWH, and I've been working here with the city specifically since 2008 on the water treatment plant and the related water resource issues. And our team that David introduced to you, amongst some other individuals, have been working with the city for several years now on both treatment objectives and water supply objectives, and wanted to present to you today an overview summary of the drought management plan and the long-term water supply plan that you received, I believe last week it was. So I wanted to start off and just give a little bit of overview background on the city's water supply system. You may be familiar with it, but may not, so I want to make sure we all have the same point of reference. The graphic on the right basically shows the city's overall infrastructure system and the land that it covers. And the city is on a surface water system, which means that you get water from Lake Okeechobee primarily, as well as rainfall that falls within your catchment area. That catchment area is 20 square miles, so it's quite significant. That's a large portion of the water that you get. All the way to the left, that long part now, which is the M Canal, is where Control Structure 2 is, and that's where you're connected to Lake Okeechobee. So the water flows all the way from, I guess you're right, all the way across to the left, just to the east, to the water treatment plant. You serve over 115,000 customers, both in the city of West Palm Beach, but also the town of Palm Beach, the town of South Palm Beach, and some unincorporated areas of Palm Beach County. Your average water demand is 28 million gallons per day, and the max that you've seen recently is 38 million gallons per day, and your treatment plant can treat 47 million gallons per day. And then your annual allocation from your water use permit on an annual basis is 39. Wanted to highlight how the city's been proactively managing its water supply over the past several years. Obviously, this goes on beyond, but this is just a time period that we wanted to highlight. And if you follow along with me from right to left, you'll see in 2002, the city completed the Renaissance Project. This is an award-winning stormwater capture project that provides water to the city that otherwise would have gone to tide. It also helps with drainage in that area. So it was a very creative use of a water source that was out there and how it could be beneficial to the city's water treatment system. In 2006, the Water Management District issued you your current water use permit, which is a 20-year water use permit. And in that same year, went online the Wetlands-Based Water Reclamation Project, which is your, also known as, or sometimes referred to as, the AWT, Emergency Wellfield Project. It's one and the same. And again, that was a way to reuse water that the city had in a beneficial use for its customers. In 2008, it's important to note that Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule changed. That was largely due to the hurricanes that had occurred a couple years back when we got the triple hit. And in that, the lake elevations were lowered basically a foot to address the integrity issues associated with Herbert Hoover Dike. So again, as that's one of your primary sources of water, that's a significant event to the city's water supply system. In 2009, the city worked hand in hand with the South Florida Water Management District on some pilot projects to, again, find alternative ways to capture water that otherwise would have been released to tide. Worked with the district on the C-51 canal, a pilot project to see if you could capture water that otherwise goes out to tide and use that for your water supply. And that pilot project was very successful in March, and then in May went ahead and installed an order for the district to do that on a permanent basis. So that's in place. And then in May, in 2009 it was a drought year, and in May things were starting to look a little hairy. Things weren't turning around as quick as we had hoped. So the city had plans in place to install a temporary divide and pump station structure on Clear Lake. Fortunately, never needed to put that in place because it did start to rain when that was finalized, but those plans were prepared and they were on the shelf, and in fact they were used last year. In March of 2010, you submitted your application for cycle testing of your aquifer storage and recovery well. And that's a well that you already have in place but has never been operational. And what's key about an ASR well is that it basically provides additional storage underground. So it's a way that when you have excess water that you can capture it and store it for a later use. So they're very beneficial when you capture water in a wet season, and then in the dry season you can then recover that water when you need it. Again, prevents water from going out to tide or being lost to seepage because of overflows. Then in April, we had the presentation to the City Commission on the recommended plan for the water treatment plan and water supply objectives, which was approved. And then in May, we started working on the surficial aquifer production well at Cumberland Drive, which is now in place and exists. And then, I see my numbers are off. In 2011, we took that project I mentioned that was the temporary structure at Clear Lake and the divide and pump station project, and we needed it. Last year was the worst drought in record in South Florida in the years they've been recording, in 88 years. So last year was a very significant drought event, unlike any that have ever been seen before. So it's a good thing that we had those plans ready to go and could implement that project. We also partnered with the Water Management District to capture releases out of the L8 reservoir and received authorization to put those releases into the M Canal. And we also worked with the Water Management District to capture water out of the C-17 canal. That was the first time that had been done. But again, water was flowing out to tide. Even during the dry season, that canal seemed to be full and was flowing out to tide. And the city worked with the district to put a temporary structure in to capture that water. And then this year, we've also been very busy as well. We've completed the evaluation of a recharge well field, I'll talk about a little bit later, submitted the water use permit application modification back in March. We have plans in place to do permanent structure at Clear Lake for the divide and pump station that worked so well last year on a temporary basis. And then, and that actually went out to bid just recently, so construction will start soon. Your drought management plan, this is the document that many of you have seen already. I wanted just to give a few overviews of that. I mentioned this project a minute ago, the Clear Lake Divide Structure and Pump Station, and it's really key to the city. The city has a lot of water at its disposal. There's certainly, not at its disposal, but at its use, which is what's the benefit of a surface water system, but only good if you can access it. And that's what this project does. It provides additional access, up to 5 feet of access to Clear Lake. And then by dividing what's known as East Clear Lake, which is where the water treatment plant intakes are, from the main lake itself, it's basically like a pool in a bucket. So if I take a foot of water in a bucket, it's a lot less volume than a foot of water in a pool. And so it allows you to capture so much of that storage that's in the larger Clear Lake and put it into the smaller intake region reservoir that's required for the water treatment plant. This access to this water is tremendously beneficial to the city because you have such a large storage area. Again, this project was done on a temporary basis last year, worked very successfully during the drought to help manage conditions, and has now been permitted. Construction bids have been received, and the notice to proceed is expected within 4 weeks. Another project that the city is looking at is the AWT Wellfield project. And one of the challenges with that project is the way it's currently permitted to be run is it requires this one-to-one recharge of putting water in a wetland and then taking it out the other end. Great concept, but in a dry season, especially in extreme drought, the water just doesn't make it to the other end. The area is just so dry. So there's a fundamental question about how that project would work when you really need it most. So one of the things that the city has been doing over the last several months is working with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to find out how this project could be repurposed in a different way, in more of a groundwater recharge fashion, that would allow the city to take use of the treatment facility they have, the wellfield infrastructure they have, and in a way that wouldn't have the limitations that are currently in place with the way it's permitted today. The benefit, if this is able to be done, and again, all talks so far with DEP have been very positive, is that not only does it allow you to utilize that existing infrastructure, but it provides regional benefits to the area as well, because you're providing groundwater recharge. That there is no divide underground that basically says this is City of West Palm Beach only, so it provides a regional benefit. It allows you to defer capital costs that otherwise were intended to be spent at the AWT facility for further upgrades, and it decreases the annual costs that you need to spend at the AWT facility because it's a lot less chemical intensive to treat it under this scenario. So this, in summary, so the drought management, the additional supply options, is the L8 reservoir that exists today, and the city has been able to use that in the past, but needing to manage that with water quality and the water capacity that's available out of it. You have the Advanced Wastewater Treatment Plant Wellfield Project, which can, last year you ran those wells and were able to get up to 24.5 MGD. You have the Cumberland well, which was done as a pilot well, but is online and was used last year during testing and can be used in the future to provide additional recharge to the city. And then again, the Clear Lake Divide Structure and Pump Station, which has just a huge benefit. It will provide up to 30 million gallons a day for 120 days and will be online next year permanently for the next dry season. So the question that I'm sure you're wondering is, do you have enough water? And I'm here to say that you do. And in fact, this data that's presented here is for next year, and it's based on a 6-month time period. So we used the 6 months of demand over last year's drought, the 6 months of the data that actually occurred last year, again, the worst drought on record, and predicted where would you be. And the answer is you have enough water. The difference between last year and this year is having access to that water. You know, again, water doesn't do you any good if you can't get to it, and that's largely what the Clear Lake Divide Structure and Pump Station will allow you to do. In addition to the C51 and the C17 projects, allow you to fill up the bucket, so to speak, ahead of time so that you're going into the dry season as full as possible in your best available position. Again, having the water, though, requires that you know how to manage it. And that's largely what, having these additional projects, we've developed now an operational protocol of how to manage that water in a way that provides the city the longest use of that water during a dry season. And I just wanted to step through this with you. This is included in your operation in the drought management plan. But generally, normal operations for Clear Lake is to keep it at elevation 14.5 down to 11. Somewhere in there is normal. And actually today it's almost at 14, so doing very well. When the lake drops to 11 feet, and these numbers may be tweaked slightly as we finalize this plan with the Water Management District, but as it drops to 11 feet, that's when the city would notify the Water Management District that we are now going to be entering drought operations protocols. At that point in time as well, we would want to receive any water that may be available from the L8 reservoir, based on its quantity and quality, as well as turn on the Cumberland well, which provides immediate drought assistance. If the lake were to continue to drop and the dry season continued to go on and fell down to 10.5, between that and 9 feet, we would then turn on the Clear Lake pump station. That's the divide pump station project I talked about. Again, that provides tremendous access to the lakes. Again, if it continues to drop beyond that, then we would open up our emergency interconnects when the lake hits elevation 9. And we have a few interconnects in place, most notably with Palm Beach County, and we would turn those on so that we could get additional water through them. Also at that point in time, knowing that perhaps situation is still very dire, we would then notify the Water Management District that we may need to use the emergency well field, and should we not have met the one-to-one recharge requirement that is in the permit, we would like to discuss that in advance with the Water Management District if we could use it in an extreme drought scenario. And eventually, if the lake were to get all the way down to 8, we would want to turn on that emergency well field with the district's concurrence. So in conclusion on the drought, last year was very eye-opening in that, again, it was the worst drought on record. The city has never had any issues with, thinking they were going to get below the raw water intakes of the lake in the past. It's gotten close a couple times, but last year was really a very significant event. But as a result of that, in addition to the projects that had been implemented and those that were envisioned as perhaps needed in the future, able to implement that temporary divide structure, working on the permanent structure now, worked with the Water Management District to pilot C51 and C17 discharges, which allowed additional water into the system, as well as to receive L8 reservoir water. So all of those projects in hand helped the city to avoid what could have been a catastrophic event last year and to remain having enough water during that historic drought. The long-term water supply plan, in addition to those projects, do you want to?
Can we ask questions before we go to the long-term plan?
Yeah, you're done with, yes, we can
sure.
ask questions on the short-term plan at this point. What questions do you have? Commissioner Mitchell?
Thanks. I want to ask you, when you talk about what the need and what's available, is that with water restrictions or without water restrictions?
That would be with water restrictions. So those numbers are based on a drought scenario. And so in a drought, we would be following the Water Management District's restrictions.
Okay. And so in a drought, you're suggesting that we would have, in a drought, and in a drought as severe as last year, we would still have access to 13.9 billion gallons. What does that mean a day? That's a day, 13.9 billion?
That's the total storage that you would have.
Right, so can
over
you
that 6-month
divide
period.
that? How many days does that come out to?
Well, it's for 6 months. That's what that basis is. Yeah, I don't.
Okay. I want to go back to it's not one of the slides, but one of the pages, page 2, under tab 1. We have a chart of all these different options with facility and availability for drought. So what I did is I looked at this and I went through it, and I've got some questions.
Sure.
Number 1, in the conservation/landscape irrigation restrictions, what I'd like to know is how much water do we need to lift the restrictions that we are currently on? Are we still on phase 3? In phase 3 as far as restrictions?
Yeah, the 1 day a week.
Okay. How much capacity do we need now to lift that restriction to phase 2 or phase 1 or
I have to defer.
any combination?
Oh, that restriction currently, as is, sunsets on June 26th and would be up for consideration to alleviate that, remove that.
I don't know if your mic's on, I couldn't.
It sunsets on June 26th, and it'll be reconsidered at that point.
Right, but how much water would we need right now? If it wasn't sunsetted, what kind of water would we need to lift the restriction?
I'm not sure what the basis of the different restrictions are. Can you guys let you answer that?
David Hanks, Public Utilities Director. Since we've gone to the one-day-a-week water restrictions, we have seen overall about a 12% decrease in consumption. So we would probably be looking, if we was to get back to what that amount was, it would be approximately about 2.4 million gallons a day.
In the second category, you've got the L8 reservoir. I seem to recall that there were problems, and I'd like you to talk about that, when we did last year use the L8 as a source. Did we not have problems with the water quality or something that was coming over?
The L8 reservoir does have high chlorides and sodium, which is salt in the water. What we did last year, one of the things was utilizing the well field to help dilute that water down. We also got a waiver from the health department to actually, if we had to, which luckily we didn't, to exceed the Environmental Protection Agency limits on chlorides in water, which is 500 milligrams per liter, I believe. We never exceeded, I believe, 168. But the highest we had was not close to that.
We need you to talk into the microphone. If you're going to respond, you need to come to the table and talk into the microphone.
But basically, we by being able to dilute that water down using our well field wells, we did not have any issues with the high chloride and sodium.
And so when that water comes into the system, what happens to the chlorides? Do they just get diluted and get to the bottom of whatever body of water it's sitting in?
Well, basically
So it's still there, right?
Well, a little bit of it. What it does is it basically will be part of the evaporation process, the dilution process, the basically, you know, the whole thing. It depends on how long the water actually flows from Control 2. It's a little over 22 miles, and that basically most of that goes away. We do track that all through our system, which is what we did.
What does that mean, most of it goes away?
Well, it dilutes it out, so there's not a problem with it coming into the plant.
Then in the additional information section, two things that stood out to me.
Wait, sorry, excuse me, Commissioner. Sir, do you want to add something?
Could I add? Jim Anderson, JLA Geosciences. I'm a geologist, hydrogeologist. I work with the city and David and all the engineering consultants. The water from the L8 will improve over time because the water that goes in blends down the chlorides and the sodium that's in the L8, so it will only get better. And the salinity that the city receives from the L8 is further blended down with the water that it has locally. So all the city's water resources are very fresh. And so when it receives that water from the L8, that water is diluted to the point where those levels come way down, and that's only going to get better with time.
Okay, so in the comments section, it says, the source is outside of the city's control, meaning the L8 reservoir is not in our control. The district has indicated the city may or may not be able to rely on flow from the L8 basin during regional drought conditions. The L8 reservoir currently has both water quality or quantity and quality issues. So those are the things that stood out for me. May or may not be able to be used. The fact that it is not within the city's control, and quality issues. So, you know, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Anderson, but I still have concerns about when you put comments like that in there, may or may not, and quality issues. So this commentary is a little bit different than what I think I just heard you say. I'm not sure why that is, or why that wouldn't have been in our comment, but this is what I got last week.
Because that's short term. That's short term. So the long term, the water quality will continue to improve from the L8. And that's just one source of many.
Okay, I have other questions, but I'll let.
Thank you.
And
Other
if I
questions?
could wait,
Commissioner Materia?
Can you please tell me how much is stored in the ASR well?
it potentially could store up to 3 billion gallons. It's basically creating an underground plume or lake underground to store water and then pull it out when we need it during drought conditions.
And where is it?
It's located at the water treatment plant.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just say concerning the L8 reservoir, recently South Florida Water Management District did approve a $70 million pumping project for that reservoir to be able to access water deeper, to basically turn the water over more than what they've been able to in the past. And everybody involved with that project sees that as a very positive move on the district's part.
Was that it, Commissioner?
Well, you said potentially. What's there now in storage in the ASR?
I can let Mark McNeil speak to that. He's our ASR guru. But
Mark, I'm going to need you to come and sit at the table if you're going to speak, because we can't get you on camera if you stand back there. Or you can go up there wherever you're most comfortable.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. My name's Mark McNeil. I'm with ASRS, working under Mock Roos, the Mock Roos team. There's currently an insignificant amount of storage in the ASR well. We took a little different regulatory approach to be able to store raw water down the well, untreated surface water, and we did that because it's a much more cost-effective way of storing water. Only getting about 70% of our water back out. If you think about a billion gallons of water there and maybe the price of that water to treat that water going down the well, every year we'd be losing anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 worth of just chemical costs to put this water underground. So it's been a long regulatory process. It's the first of its kind in the country, so it's taken a little while to work through the issues, a little while being about 15 years. But we're nearing the end. We've gotten some very encouraging word last Friday from DEP that EPA is looking very favorably on this. By the end of June, we are expected to receive approval to start putting raw water down the well, and at that point we'll be going very aggressively in moving ahead to get some of this storage down the well. So today there's not really any. We hope in a couple of months that we'll have as much as a billion gallons in storage in that well and be able to start proving that it'll be a very cost-effective part of your long-term water supply. We talk about up to 3 billion gallons. Maybe one way to think of it is about 8 million gallons a day can be put down the well and pulled back out of the well, and at 8 million gallons a day out of, let's say, a dry season demand of up to 40 million gallons, that's about 20% of your water supply that you could be counting on in the future to come from your ASR well.
And so if you're able to start operating that well in what, as early as this summer?
July, yeah.
How long does it take to get to capacity?
You build up over time. We've got a very aggressive testing program that we've proposed to DEP. They've supported that program. It'll take us a year to get up to that billion gallons of storage because we've got to put some in, pull some out, test it, make sure that there's nothing unusual that we would see. We certainly don't expect it, but it's a stepwise process to get to that billion gallons. Sometimes it might take a couple of years until you've demonstrated that you've got a very adequate water supply, high quality water coming back out of that ASR well. So we can't be looking at 3 billion gallons next year, but certainly the 3 billion gallons we're talking about is something within the next couple of years we expect to get to.
But it's not usable until you actually get the EPA to say, yes, fine, all your testing has come back and it's...
Yeah, it would be usable at the higher cost of the water, but at the inexpensive cost where we can use this just like any other reservoir where we're just storing raw water and recovering raw water that goes right into our water treatment plant. That's what we need EPA's endorsement of.
Okay, and of the, are you saying 3 million or billion?
3 billion is kind of a volume, 8 million gallons a day is a rate.
Okay, so, of that 3 billion gallons, is any of it leached out into the underground environment?
Well, we conservatively estimate that we're only going to pull back about 70% of the water, leaving a little bit of water down there to keep a little buffer zone between our fresh water that we store and the more brackish groundwater that we're putting this water into. So leaving about 30% behind.
And this is a well that was dug. This was a permitted well that was dug, and it is. Is it also pulling off the aquifer?
No, it's a zero consumptive use. We're actually leaving a little bit of water behind, so you can think of it as a net positive to the environment. Some of that water that would have otherwise just been lost out to the ocean, that water is going to be left in the ground and recharging our aquifer. So it really is, it helps the region in terms of leaving a little bit of water behind. The 70%, we lose 30% of it is what we're estimating. In surface reservoirs, you lose at least that much just through evaporation. So our losses are just through blending and freshening of the surrounding groundwater. Other losses would be to the atmosphere in a surface reservoir system.
Okay, we're going to go on to other questions. If that's okay. Commissioner James.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to refer to the chart that Commissioner Mitchell referred to, which is in the drought management plan, and I need you to, the slide that you have which says, will we have enough water supply?
The one with the glasses.
Yeah, okay. Now, somebody has got to kind of compare apples to apples for me, because when I look at this chart, it talks about different sources available for drought management plans, some of which are not listed on this summary. So I need to make sure that as we're calculating this 13.9 billion gallons that's available, that it coincides with the sources that are listed in the more detailed chart. So, for example, the L8 reservoir is off the table in terms of drought management, correct?
No.
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 It's available, but it does, as was pointed out, it's not under our control necessarily because the Water Management District owns the reservoir. They're currently working on their operational protocols with the Corps of Engineers because it's part of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Program. And the way that the current infrastructure is limited to how much depth they can access in the lake, as well as the quality topics. So it's there. And it's part of what's in here as well.
Yeah, but okay, where is it then? Show me where it is on this chart here, because I don't see L8 listed. So am I missing it? When you calculate 13.9 billion gallons, how much of that is coming from L8 on this chart?
It's part of the flows that come through control structure number 2, because that's the water that flows out of the L8 canal into the city's M canal. So it's in that number. So it's not separated out as a separate number, but it's.
How many billion gallons are we talking about from L8 alone? Because L8 has the quality issues that we talked about. It's outside of our control. So I need to make sure that, how much are we counting on from L8?
We're saying that you can, with the current pump configuration that exists today, you could get up to 32 million gallons per day from the L8.
Give me a total number, because I want to compare billions and billions.
Okay.
And how do we get to
Let's see, last year they gave, I think it was 28,000 million, so 28 billion gallons came from the L8. Is that right? Let me look up, hold on. Oh, sorry, that's acre feet. Okay, oh geez. Last year, the district, through the L8 reservoir, discharged 20,000 acre feet, which is another metric. Not all of that necessarily went to the city of West Palm Beach, because it might have gone north to the Loxahatchee. I'd have to get my calculator out to convert gallons from acre feet.
Becky, I think if I can, do you mind if I reiterate what you're asking?
Sure, Mayor.
I think
I'm not speaking
I think the
English.
question is, if the L8, say for example the L8 was not available,
Right.
would we still have enough water as shown on this?
Yes, yes. So it's a component of the flows that are shown in that 11.1 number on the slide, but it's not the majority of that by any means.
Okay, but you don't know how much of the 11.1 we're counting on from 11?
I'd have to
Okay.
look it up for you, yeah.
Let's move along then. So if the AWT emergency well field, we're saying is 1.2 billion over a 6-month period.
Correct.
Now, the Cumberland Test Production Well, which is part of the drought management plan on the chart, where is that on this slide here?
it's the
Cumberland
lake-
Test Production Well.
It's the lake recharge line.
That's the lake recharge.
Correct.
That's only 0.3 billion.
Correct.
Okay? The interconnects I see. Now, the Clear Lake Divide Structure and Pump Station, is that part of lake storage or
Correct,
lake
yes.
recharge?
Lake storage.
Okay, so that's the 2.2. Process water recovery is part of our drought plan.
Yeah, process water recovery is basically a conservation technique at
Okay.
the treatment plant. So although it's being done, it's not something we counted for as available water. It's part of the original water that comes in. It's whether it really affects the demand more than the water availability.
Okay, so the primary sources, again, based upon this chart, of our water supply over a 6-month extreme drought period will be from C17 and C51 tidal capture.
And correct, and waters that flow over control structure 2, which also include the Lake Okeechobee and any water that would come from the L8 reservoir.
Right, in the L8 we have some questions on. Okay, all right, I'll have some other questions, but I'll move on.
No problem.
Commissioner.
Commissioner Moffett, then Robinson. Commissioner Moffett?
Thank you. I'm looking at, is this on? I
Yeah,
think it
you're
is.
on,
Okay.
you're on.
I'm looking at the long-term water supply plan options, and I noticed that the AS,
We're
Are
not
you
there
looking
yet.
at long-term or short-term?
oh, okay, never mind, we'll wait.
Okay, Commissioner Robinson?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the best, according to the chart, the best possibility for us is a Clear Lake Divide Structure and Pump Station. But I started thinking that in a presentation that Mr. Hanks made when we utilized that pumping procedure, that I think we were told that that lake is not, the depth is not consistent. There are sandbars out there. So how do you plan, or what is dredging in the proposal to make it even across so we can get to what, 14.511? Because if there are sandbars out there, and you may have 14 in one pocket, but you may only have 8, 9 in another, so how we're going to get? You're going to dredge it to make it consistent or what? Because we were told that there are sandbars out there, and there is not a consistency.
Sir, do you want to come up here?
You got to be in the
Come
camera.
up here.
Jim Anderson, JLA Geosciences.
Speak into the mic.
There are sandbars out there.
That's what we were told.
But when you pull the lake down, that lake draws from a bigger system, and that's the groundwater system. So whether the sandbars are there or not, that doesn't matter, because that divide structure pulls from the lake, which in turn pulls from the groundwater system. So there's a huge reservoir, whether that is down there, and those numbers include those sandbars being left in place and not dredging the lake.
So we don't need to dredge because the water's available
You do not.
because we're doing the control structure.
That's correct. And the pump station is going to be located in a place where it can pull from greater depths.
It's going to be in one of those
In
troughs.
the deeper areas, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's move
Wait,
along.
I have more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. And I'd like to know that we can ask all the questions we've got, right?
Have I stopped you?
I'm just.
Go right ahead.
Just asking. I didn't know if there's a time limit.
Well, there is.
Well, this is kind of important that we get to
Well, we
it,
can
all
meet
of our
again as
questions. I want to go back to, the AWT and the emergency well field. One of my greater concerns is that in the last drought, I recall Mr. Hanks coming to the city. Actually, it was after a really disturbing headline, and that was $37 million AWT plant is, I'll just, let me see, if an abject failure. Does everybody recall that headline?
Yes.
Right. So what and I think Mr. Hanks was quoted as saying, you know, he feels like he's hitting his head against the wall trying to figure out how to solve that problem. I have not heard or gotten any reports since then to show how this now is going to work, and it is featured somewhat prominently in our drought plan. So I've not seen the science behind why now it's going to work as opposed to why it didn't work before, and as importantly, at what cost? What is the cost now? Because from what I understand, it requires a lot of chemicals in order to be able to, you know, quantity and quality are the two important things when you're talking about water, correct? So I've not seen how we now think when we didn't produce maybe 6 million gallons a day, we're now going to be able to produce, what, 20 to 25 million gallons a day. I'd like to know what has happened out there and what science is behind that statement.
Okay, the AWT, what we've done with that facility is to see what the best use of it is. When we utilize that facility the way it was designed to go to the wetlands, we're typically able to only get 2 to 4 million gallons of water through the facility to discharge out into the wetlands area. So it comes with a very high cost. It's very maintenance intensive because of the filters and the UV system that's in the facility has a lot of maintenance issues. So what we did was look at what could we do with that facility perhaps to get more flow through it without being more costly, you know, spending 10 or 20 million dollars to fix it or rebuild it and things like that. So what we did was we looked at, could we turn it into a reclaimed water facility? So we've done that over the course of some months off and on to see what that would require us to do. Basically, we've been able to do that. We do not discharge water when we're doing that because we don't have a permit to discharge it as reclaimed water. So we just recycle it back around the plant. But what we found is we don't have any issues running that as a reclaimed facility. We don't have any chemical phosphorus issues or anything like that with the effluent, the water coming out of the facility. It is extremely less costly than what we're doing now. It could probably save us well over $1 million a year in operational costs to do that. We've been working with FDEP to get the facility reclassified as a reclaimed facility and a permit to discharge to our well impoundment area. To take the water there. When we've run the facility as a reclaimed facility, we're consistently getting 8, 9, 10, and even a little over 10 million gallons of water through the facility that we could take to the wellfield impoundment area, where now we can't do that. So that would be very critical during a drought, going directly to the impoundment area instead of over to the wetlands, because the problem we ran into with that is the water would just go over there and evaporate or seep into the ground, and there was no water available to transfer over to the well field. So we've been doing that basically for about the last 6 months off and on. We have still been discharging water to the wetlands some, basically going on and off, reclaim and in the wetlands quality water, because it is extremely difficult to meet those water quality standards for the wetlands. The standards for that water is actually higher than the water coming out of our water treatment plant. So that's the difficulty that we run into with that. But it looks very promising. Again, Mock Roos, Mr. Biggs, has been working on that project with us. Along also with DEP, we've had several meetings with them. We've been giving them water quality data for them to review on this project. So far, it doesn't look like there's any issues with that, so hopefully in the near future we will be able to get a permit modification to discharge directly to the impoundment area and not out into the wetlands.
Well, so that was a nice long answer, thank you. When it says use of the well field is a last on, first off option, that says, to me, as I read it, this is not your go-to option, correct?
Well, we prefer it not to be.
Why, if it's working as well as you are hoping that it will, why would you not?
Well, because basically, we still would only be able to put out about 10 million gallons of water a day. But if we could get a permit modification through South Florida, which is one of the things we are seeking also, to put other source water onto the well field, then we could make that a different component to be able to get more water out of those wells. But currently, you know, it still would be a one-to-one process, so we would be looking at maybe 10 million gallons of water from those wells, which we still would, you know, lose some of it to seepage and evaporation.
Okay,
So,
I thought I had read somewhere, I don't know where I found that, because I made a note that you were estimating 20 million gallons a day from that? Did I see that in, and who, tell me on the AWT, because this gets confusing, what engineering firm is the city working with to now transform it from what it was to what you're envisioning it to be? Who is that engineer?
It's Mock Roos,
Mock
and
Roos.
Mr. Biggs is here in attendance. But the 24.5 million is the capacity of those wells. So that's what we could actually pull out of utilizing the 10 wells we have. That's the capacity of those wells currently.
Okay. Then I had a question about the interconnects. And as I read it, you know, we're looking, there was a page that talked about, we looked at the city of Lake Worth, we looked at city of Riviera Beach, and we looked at the county, right? Riviera and Lake Worth were not options for us because of how their system is different than our system, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so how, as you see it now, what is the amount, what we had to do, again, going back to memory, in the last drought was try to get water from the county, and we were up against, I guess, two different things. One, different size pipes that didn't allow us to pull as much water as we actually needed or wanted, but the county was willing to give us. And two, there was a quality issue, and the blending or the mixture of the different types of water was an issue. So what, and who is the engineer behind making the determination of what, that was one of the things that I was struck by in looking at the plan. My recommendation would be that when you put things like this in here, you should attribute it to what engineering or what science is giving us this information. Okay, that would be helpful as I was reading it. So what kind of, in this plan, are we expecting to get from the county in the interconnects? What is it a day? Because the billion doesn't help me. It's getting to how much a day can we now expect to get if the county is willing to sell it? And from what I understand, they are.
Yes,
what
they
can we
are.
expect to get from the county?
Basically around 3 to 3.5 million gallons of water a day.
And is that in here somewhere? Is there a report that shows us that?
Yeah.
Yes, it's in there.
It's in the appendix. No, but the report that,
That's the memo about it.
okay.
And what we did was we had a water quality study done along with Palm Beach County, and that was done by Carollo Engineering to see what issues we may have if we blended our water on a more long-term basis, because we did have some water quality issues last year after we took the county water, and basically it was due to the long pipe run from State Road 7 at Okeechobee out to Ibis. It created issues because that's about a 6 or 7 mile pipe with really no flow on it till it gets to the IBIS area. So we looked at that. We wanted to see, you know, where could we take water, how long could we take water if we got into an issue. We've also looked at areas that we could valve off and only take county water if we had to. So we've been able to do that. And more comprehensively, as part of a water and wastewater master plan we're doing through the engineering firm of Brown and Caldwell, we're actually going to be looking at all the underground infrastructure to see what that looks like, because we do have some issues, because our system is built out basically large pipes to small pipes, which every other utility is built out like that too. So it's hard then to push water through small pipes back into large pipes. You just lose too much pressure and volume there. So we are going to be looking at, through our master plan, you know, what we would need to do and a cost associated with it if we wanted to have some more areas that we could utilize the interconnects with. And also at Lake Worth and Riviera Beach, if there's something that we could do to make it more viable than it currently is, to take water from those two resources also in the future.
Well, I'd like to see the report that you, since last year, it's been easily a year since we were even notified of the pretty dire situation. I'd like to see this report. This memo doesn't give me all the information that I'm looking for as far as real capacity, and I'm not an engineer, so I'm doing the best I can to read these, and what the county is saying. I don't see anything from the county. I see Jacobs. I'm not sure who Jacobs is, and a memo that they wrote to Mr. Sam Heedy. I guess that's what he's with the city, right? But I don't see anything from the county to say what they are capable and what their feeling is as far as capacity to sell and at what cost to the city. And then one other thing that stood out to me is in the process recovery category, which you have listed as an option for drought. What does MGY?
Million gallons a year.
Okay, so is it, when you divide 365 days into 510, so that's a very, when you say a million gallons a year, that's an infinitesimally small number per day, correct?
Yes, it is. Basically, it's about
So
one and a
gallon?
half million gallons a day.
Okay. So that, but that's
Which
very
during a
small.
drought is very significant, though.
I'm sorry?
During a drought, that
That's
is
a lot,
actually a very significant amount.
That's 1.5 million gallons a day of the 28 that we need.
And typically during a drought, the consumption goes
So why
down.
wouldn't we use day then? Why did you jump to year? Because we, you know, just so we can
I
make
think
better
that-
comparisons, it would be easier if
I
you
think
kept
that's a
everything-
lesson for the future. You're exactly right. We need to use the same metrics so that it's more understandable. So
Okay,
let's
there's
remember that.
I lied about, that was my last one. My last one is the water quality exemption. You know, as I read it, our plan is actually including poorer quality water as part of our plan, and like as if that's acceptable, and it isn't acceptable to me. So when I read it, the city currently has an exemption in place. What does that mean?
That means if we was to get into even a worse drought than we had last year, and one of our options was to take L8 reservoir water, more water than we were able to last year, and we had more high chlorides and high sodium, we would have an exemption to beyond the 250 milligrams per liter up to 500, but we would not expect that would ever occur. Last year, we never got close to 250. We put that in place just as a precautionary measure, just in case, but we would not expect to ever have to utilize
Well,
that.
then my point in that question is this. You know, you keep using words like "we never expected" or "this is the first time in 88 years." As we are looking in South Florida more and more at changes in in climate, changes in water, changes that we have, I've been on the commission for 10 years. We've gone through at least 5 droughts. And if you wanted to look back historically, that's probably the most in that kind of in a decade. So we keep doing a lot of firsts. I don't want us to be planning based on, well, the likelihood of that never happening is significant. We need to understand what the cost associated with that is, but I think we need to at least be having the conversation about not, we don't think that will ever happen, because that keeps happening to us. So that which we never thought would happen is actually happening. And I think when one of the first slides that you put up that talked about that was the worst drought in 88 years, as if that will never happen to us again, like for another 88 years. I don't expect that that's the case, and I think we need to wrap our brains around at least understanding what that looks like, and then what is our plan to get there. How much can we afford? How much can't we afford? And I think that from my perspective, some of this is lacking. I think there's a lot of good information in here, but I'm still not convinced that this is the right combination of things, only because there's a lot of ifs. If, things that we don't even have control over. So those are my questions and
Well, a good part of it is our working relationship with the Water Management District, because a lot of this will go through the Water Management District. I like the fact that you all looked at this using the metrics of last year's drought, the 88-year drought. So even in the 88-year drought, we have almost 3 times as much water availability than we actually need. So if we have a 200-year drought, we should be in good shape.
Yes, and we've done modeling, and Dr. Paul Stout could talk to this, but where we've looked at what if, given, there's no rainfall, the Lake Okeechobee is cut off, so there's no flows coming from it, kind of these worst case scenarios, what does that look like? And if that had happened last year with no additional inputs from the well field, from the C-17, it would have been bad. But being able to access that additional water in the lake is just, I can't overstress what a huge benefit that is going to be to the city. And so we have modeling results like that we could share with you that show, all these what ifs, and it's all guessing what might happen climatologically, et cetera. But, in the worst case, how does the city fare? And we have graphs that can show that.
But has anybody stopped to think about what the entry into the city of West Palm Beach is going to look like if you start pulling at that level from Clear Lake? Has anybody thought about
Absolutely.
A snapshot picture of what is it going to smell like? What's it going to look like for the people who visit, live here, live along the lakes?
Yes, we've done, we have bathymetric surveys, which is basically how the bottom elevation of the lake looks. We've looked at drawing that water down that 5 feet, what that would do to the lake levels and how much that would shrink, if you will, the banks and kind of create that beach look. It's not very much, to be honest with you, but obviously it's more than when you drive by it today what it looks like. We do have that information.
Right, because we know what it looked like in the drought.
Right.
And it was pretty severe
Yeah.
in its receding lines. So imagining another one like that with already lower lake levels and now pulling more water at a pretty from what I can see, that's a pretty considerable amount to be relying on that. So,
But it's
if that is, well, in a drought, it's not really. It's going to be difficult.
It comes from the aquifer.
Yeah, I mean, your lake is is below sea level, the bottom, so it allows you to get infiltration in from groundwater, even in a dry season. I mean, that's where utilities
Right,
are
but
on
it
wells
already
get
did
their
that.
water from.
It already did that without the pump. is
Right.
what
Well-
it's already doing this. We're doing is an exercise that's actually going to pull more water than we've been able to in the past. Correct?
Well, and what I wanted to say is that this plan that we're talking about thus far is the short term, which is really the next 18 months or so. And then the long-term plan includes additional infrastructure that will alleviate that situation even further. So we can't fix everything tomorrow, so to speak, and I hear what you're saying. We've actually looked at that and have that information. Ideally, we wouldn't want to bring the lakes down low. We know that that's a very visual thing, but in an extreme drought, if it's that or water, you know, those are some of the provisions that the city has in place. But some of the longer term provisions, which are 2 years out, will help to fill in the lake a lot more and keep the system full heading into a dry season to limit how much you'd have to pull the lake down in the future.
Commissioner James.
Thank you. I want to go back to the reconciliation because something jumped out at me and I didn't get it the first time I asked. In this chart, well, actually up there, the third line from the bottom, where you talk about Control Station 2, C17, and C51, correct? Mm-hmm. And we're going to get 11.1 billion gallons from those three sources. However, when I look at the drought management plan, and I see the designation for C17 and C51, it's saying that those are not available during a drought. So how do we come up with these 11? Because you've already said that Control Station number 2 doesn't really pump out a lot. We're not relying a lot on that. So it looks like C17 or C51 are our go-to sources, but in the drought management plan, you say they are not available. I need some reconciliation here.
Sure. So we do rely on control structure 2. That's the L8 canal that feeds the M canal. So that is relied on. The C51 is not.
And the L8, excuse me, I don't want to interrupt, but the L8 has some quality issues.
Correct.
We've already talked about that.
Yep.
Okay.
But the C17, there's a component of that can be used as well as the C51. But what you would think is those canals, when they're full, is when there'd be excess water that's going to tide. So that's when you'd want to capture that. That's not likely to be during a drought scenario because everything is depressed, all the water elevations are down.
And that's what we're talking about, a drought.
Right. So there's a little bit of component from C51, but it's very minuscule in that number. But what we found with C17 last year, where you might think that, you know, logic might tell you that the canal would be down and therefore unavailable during a drought. It, in fact, has been available, has been full, has been discharging to tide, and the city's been able to capture that. So we have a component in there for that. It's a conservative number of that. And then as we put our permanent structure in, we'll be able to rely on that more significantly, and that's part of the long-term plan that I'll go over.
No, I'm dealing with a drought plan. I'm looking at whoever put, and I've got a question. Okay. In the comments, it says the city, and this is C17. The city has installed temporary pumping facilities. However, this alternative water source is dependent on stormwater runoff, rainfall, and will likely not be readily available during a drought. So why are we now including that in your calculation up here of the 13.9 billion? And there's a similar statement with C51. This alternative water source is dependent on stormwater runoff, rainfall, and will likely not be readily available during a drought.
Right, so it will likely not be available, but what these numbers are based on are the actual numbers and the actual flows that you could get from those two sources last year in the 2011 drought.
Okay. Again, maybe I'm a little bit slow. I'm not an engineer.
It's okay.
All I see is a drought management plan where these have big red check marks for C17 and C51 saying they're not available. Now I see a chart which says in the calculation of the 13.9 billion gallons available, we get 11.1 billion gallons, which is a pretty significant percentage of the 13.9, from C17, C51, and Control Station number 2. How do I reconcile those two comments, those two statements? It's a drought management plan.
Sharon.
Commissioners, it's Sharon Trost. I'm a professional geologist, and I'm the Director of Regulation at the Water Management District. I think where the confusion is here is that C17, water will be available from that source between approximately November and about February. February or March, it's going to start drying up. The driest months that we normally encounter are March, April, and May. So I think that we can modify the plan a little bit to clarify that situation, because during the official dry season, there would be some water available from those two sources, but it peters out early in the calendar year. That C7, and during the rest of the year when there's a lot of water running down that canal, you probably don't need to put the water in the lake because you've got water already in Grassy Waters and in Clear Lake and Lake Mangonia.
Okay, thank you, but I'm not sure I'm there yet. Okay, let me ask the question another way. On your chart up there, can you tell me of the 11.1 billion gallons,
Sharon.
how much we're going to get from C17? Let's do this one at a time. Whoever put this report together, what number did they allocate to the C17 availability?
We have those numbers, and while GJ shares is coming up, also over those 6 months, that's not assuming that everything is available the full 6 months, so that's maybe some of the confusion.
I'm just saying, you
No,
have the 6-month supply, 11.1 billion gallons.
I can probably, the
Say your name
calculation
first,
was...
please.
Oh, GJ Shares, I'm from MWH. Sorry about that. 11.1 is a total volume available from the 3 sources I said. And C17 and C51 are based on the flows we had from them early last year. And that's, I can't remember what the figure is, and I can give it to you, but it's just a fraction of the total. It's just a minor thing. Basically, all flows were from CS2. There were some minor ones during January, early February. We got through C17, and I don't think there was anything, or hardly anything from the C51.
So you're saying of the 11.1, most of it's coming from control station number 2?
Absolutely.
Which is the L8 water?
It's anything coming that way from Lake O, what
Or
fills
Lake
up, and we can
Okeechobee
pick it from
through the
CS2.
M Canal.
But L8 feeds
is
that too,
control
correct.
structure.
Right, but in a drought, and if Lake Okeechobee is low, how are we going to pull that quantity of water in a drought?
You aren't, because when the lake goes below 11 feet, when Lake Okeechobee goes below 11 feet, we can only rely on what's local stormwater runoff into that basin, because it's gravity flow that leads it down the L8. But this plan that they have has many different options apart from the L8. I think it would be helpful for the commissioners if we were to take these sources and break everything out so that you have the specific amounts for each source rather than rolling them up, and to convert everything in the report to million gallons per day, and then everything would be apples to apples comparison. They have those numbers. It's very hard to do that calculation in your head when you're in front of a podium, but I'm sure they can put that in there for you.
All right, because I also need somebody to reconcile what to me is a pretty blatant inconsistency in the report, where C17 and C51 have big red check marks, but all of a sudden now they're included in at least a line item that says 11.1. I don't know if that's a minuscule amount from C17 or C51, but in the written narrative, it says we can't count on C17 and C51 in a drought condition at all. So there's an inconsistency there which I need resolved. And let me ask another question, which is more of a format. I see a number of firms listed on the front page of this report. Have all of these firms signed off on the entire report? Have they all reviewed this entire report?
They're all represented over there.
Yes, we've been working as a collective team with the city in developing these documents.
Okay, so if there is a problem, we can look to the professional liability insurance of all these firms if these numbers don't work out, right? Because they've all signed off on the entire report.
I'm not a lawyer,
Maybe.
I can't answer that.
Okay, well, I mean, are they all kind of staking their professional reputation on the substance of this report because you've listed them here?
Would anybody like to respond to that? Probably not, but are you guys comfortable with this report?
In its entirety?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I could speak on our team. We've worked very diligently on this, and we've put our professional expertise in developing this plan, and we stand behind our work
Okay,
product.
you're with who?
I'm with MWH, right?
Okay, JLA Geosciences?
They're here.
That would be me, and I am.
Okay, Jacobs Engineering? You're comfortable with the report in its entirety? Okay, and Mark Roos?
Yes, sir.
In its entirety?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. That's all for them.
And I guess I would, Sharon, since you're sitting here, I would like to get your impression as well. I know you've been working with them on this, and how do you feel this is moving along, and what questions do you have?
I feel the initial submittal is very good. We do have comments on it. My staff has been able to review it, and I have not had a chance yet to meet with the city and discuss those technical comments in detail. And we are in the process. I have 7 people reviewing the long-term plan. We have already reviewed the short-term one. I think the basic components are there. This is the first time that I have seen an array of alternatives thought through by the city. I'm very happy about that. I think that we are on the right track. Granted, there's going to be some hammering out and some tweaking,
Sure,
but the basic recipe to solve your problem is in the report.
Well, Mayor, I would like to see a revised report which works out some of these inconsistencies and reconciliation, because
What would
this
you?
11.1 is a big number, and I'm seeing stuff that says that maybe we can't count on all the elements. So I need a breakdown
Okay.
to get comfortable with this.
No problem.
No, we can do that. Commissioner Materia?
Mayor, I'm new to this. Your name is Sharon, right?
Yes.
So this is, I feel a tremendous responsibility to get this right, and it was a big learning curve for me to go through all this. But I was at the commission meeting, and I wasn't a commissioner yet, when the discussion came up about this. You spoke several times at the podium about this report in general. And some of the things that I felt were discussed at that meeting and aren't really addressed here. And I have real concerns about the potential of being able to get drill permits, the potential of being able to get the AWT permit. And this report, in my opinion, doesn't go far enough to cover future possibilities. I mean, I feel like there's other things out there, and I've spent the last 4 days, and you're going to probably cringe, speaking with the Southwest Florida Management District in Tampa. They have completely different issues, but they really created a four-pronged approach to dealing with it, some things that we don't have at all considered here. And it concerns me that we've got a well field that hasn't been permitted yet, might be permitted, and we might have it up to par in a year, but it's part of a program that's being put in place now.
Well, Commissioner, first of all, our situation in Southwest and here is couldn't be farther or more different. This is one of 2 cities left in South Florida that rely on surface water for your drinking water supply. That's a rare bird indeed. Okay. With regard to the well field, you don't have a well field that's unpermitted. You have an ASR well that's not fully permitted yet for actual cycling of injecting, storing, and recovering. The water management districts do not regulate that. That is an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, a federal and a state DEP, because when water gets injected in, there has to be certain components in the water quality of the native water and the injected water. And there are a series of permits that can be gotten. We've gotten them before at our district for our ASR projects. I'm confident that the city is going to be able to get the permits they need from EPA for the ASR well.
Okay,
because they're doing everything right. They're following all the protocols to get those permits. That's just one piece of their big picture that they're submitting in this plan. And the most important thing you have going on right now is that you submitted several months ago a request to modify your water use permit with the Water Management District. We've already sent out our first letter, a request for additional information, and we are working through that process. These 2 reports, the short-term and the long-term report, are kind of laying out your array for next 18 months and then your array for, let's say 20 years. But a lot of that detail is going to be hammered out as we work with you in the actual water use permit. And of course, once that permit is issued, the agreement that we have expires and it's moot, because the permit is really what you need. The permit's going to give you your reasonable assurance that the water is going to be there under certain drought conditions and the legal right to use that water and your operational plans, your protocols, and it protects you and it protects the other existing legal users in the vicinity.
Okay, I understand. I have some environmental issues with this as well.
Okay.
The drawing down of our aquifer, the wells that are being considered to being drilled. So there's a number, I think it's 15, right?
But they aren't going to the aquifer.
What are they?
They were.
Well, now wait. There's a lot of different aquifers, and the wells that you're talking about along the M Canal are shallow aquifer wells, and the ASR well goes into the Floridan aquifer, which is much deeper. And between the shallow aquifer that we're standing on right now, it's right underneath this building, and the Floridan aquifer, there's a thick, clayey confining layer that keeps them separate. ASR is a tried and proven technology throughout Florida. It has been used in many cases, and there are a number of utilities that use ASR successfully for injection, storage, and recovery of treated water. So there's a very rigorous permitting process, precisely, Commissioner, to protect the aquifer, the resource, and the people. The people who regulate this take it very seriously, and EPA has delegated certain aspects of that regulation to DEP, but certain components of it are still controlled by the EPA.
Okay, so let's go back to the 15 wells. So if what you're saying is because they're shallow, they're not actually drawing down the lake?
No, they're going to capture water in the
Seepage.
canal and also seepage water from the lake, and they will also capture rainwater that seeps into the aquifer.
Rainwater that we're not going to have during a drought.
There'll be water in the aquifer
Aquifer.
deeper that it'll capture, and we're not going to let them draw the lakes down so much, draw the water level in the aquifer down so much that it impacts some other legal user. There are ways to simulate all this through computer analysis, and we do this every day, and Dr. Stout, who is on your team, is an expert in this. They prepare a model that simulates what the actual physical earth looks like with the canals, the rain, the evaporation, the well fields. Everything is put in there. They can run different scenarios, and they can actually predict what will happen where, how much the water levels will drop, how they will fluctuate, and where there could be trouble or hot spots. Those tools are required as analysis before any permits are issued.
Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm not an engineer, but
No, that's all right.
It just doesn't, it's not reasonable to me. I just feel like we're drawing down the lake, and you're not going to let the management district isn't going to let the lake get drawn.
Well, the lake has to get drawn down to provide water to your plant.
I understand.
mean, that's where the water's coming from.
I do. I understand that. I'm just concerned that we aren't going far enough with this. That there's other opportunities for us.
Maybe those other opportunities that you're talking about or thinking about are things that we will be talking about in the long-term plan. I might guess.
Okay, an RO plant's not in our long-term plan, or even talked about. So I just want to be able to...
already moving forward with our plant, to redo our plant. That's been approved since 2009. I don't think we're going to redo what we've planned for our water plant. And there is an RO plant as a backup to our water plant.
See, I just feel like I have a big responsibility to really have an understanding of what's happening here so I can explain this to people when they ask me on the street. Because the only way they're going to get any information is either from the Post or if they should happen to be listening to this meeting. And we know that,
Well,
what else?
what we can do, we probably need a refresher on the plant and where we're going with that.
I think that would be great.
So let's make sure that we take a look at that.
And can I just ask Sharon one more question?
Sure, go right ahead.
You feel certain, as a geologist and working for the management district, that the 15 wells that are being considered are going to get permitted?
Well, I'm in charge of whether that permit gets issued or not, and what I am certain of is if we do the analysis that I just mentioned, including the modeling, and if it meets all the criteria, yes, we'll issue the permit. If there's a problem, we may have to modify it. Maybe it won't be 15 wells, it'll be 12. I don't know. But I do know that we issue permits every day after we do a careful analysis. And we're going to do the analysis and use the same criteria we use for everybody else through all the cities in the district, the 7.7 million people, 1.5 million acres of agriculture, 2 national parks. We issue permits and water for all different types of purposes. But I can assure you, if it meets the criteria and if the submittal is proper, we're going to issue the permit.
And this is still a give and take between us and the district. So what you're seeing here is going to be tweaked because it's got to go through that process. So it's still a give and take. Commissioner James.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I guess maybe a summary would be helpful. And this question, I think, is very basic. What is the difference now from a year ago as reflected in this plan? If we were to go through this 1 in 88 year drought this year, does this plan help us, and how does it?
Absolutely. So the difference between this year, or this coming year, next year, and last year, you will have this divide structure in place, which again gives you access to over 2 billion gallons of water you already had, but gives you access to it.
I thought the divide structure wasn't going to be in effect.
It's going to be online in January.
Okay, in January.
Correct.
We're talking about summer.
Right. Your
Summer's
lakes
our
right
rainy
now
season.
we're heading into the wet season, and your lakes are at almost 14 feet. So
Okay.
there's not a high probability that we're going to have an issue for the next several months. I won't say,
Okay,
can't say
all right,
for certain,
fine.
but you're good so far
So we
this year.
have the
looks good.
divide system.
You have the divide system. You have the C-17 canal we used at the very late end of the summer last year, but that'll be in place it's on a temporary basis, but it'll be in place to fill the system in advance. It's not a drought. We wanted to limit our calling it a drought management technique because of what it is, but it's a pre-drought management technique, and it really helps position you very well going into a dry season, into a drought season. So you'll have that online you'll have that temporarily available online to use. So those two things are different. And again, the lakes the access to the water in the lake is very key.
Okay. Again, going back to the 13.9 billion number, the lakes is the lake storage, right? On your little slide there?
Correct.
Which is 2.2 billion.
Correct.
And I guess it's 2.2 billion of the 5.1 billion that we would need.
Well, it could be, yes. It's 2.2 of the 13.9.
Well,
so where you get it from may fluctuate, and you have more options. You have greater flexibility than you've had in the past, so that you can choose which is the best
But the best
scenario.
we're going to get is 2.2 billion out of it.
Yes.
All right, and then you still going back to C-17. I just got to see the numbers.
We'll break that down.
Yeah, because on one hand you say it's not available.
Yeah, and we'll change it to million gallons a day because it's too
Okay,
confusing.
all right.
What
Commissioner, we're in a much better position. Nature's played a role in that, but also I think some of the improvements we've done. So,
Well, I'm just asking for what is the difference between
We have a
this
lot
year
more
and
rain.
last year? And
Yeah,
can we quantify it? Can we quantify it?
yeah.
Are we in better condition going into a drought season now than we were a year ago? And if so, what are the numbers?
The lake is at 14 feet something right now. Last year, it was at what at this time? It was like at 10 or something.
You know, Sam?
Again, I don't want speculation. I mean, if you
10,
could
1,
give us a report
11.
showing us the position we're in now,
Of course, we can do that.
how that compares to where we were a year ago.
we'll give you a last year to this year type report.
We'll do a
We'll
comparison.
show you the numbers, and I'm dancing every day so it rains, let me tell you.
Okay.
We can quantify that, but just for reference, last year around this time, the lake, Clear Lake, was approximately 11 feet, and this year, right now, it's about 14, so
Okay.
big difference.
And same with Okeechobee. Okay, I am going to recommend that we leave the long-term plan to the next Mayor Commission work session, so we have enough time to talk about it and don't do it in a rushed way. And at that time, we can also bring back the comparisons and also talk about the plant. I want an update on the plant. So next Mayor Commission work session, I want an update on the plant, and we're going to talk about the long-term.
Just a
plan.
general comment on the long-term, Mayor.
Sure.
I thought that I'd made it clear in the motion, and I know I sent you a subsequent memo, that I wanted to see the full universe of alternative sources of water. And this long-term plan as currently drafted seems to have a limited set of options. So I would repeat that request, that we consider the full universe, as outlandish as they may be, to the more reasonable, so that we as commissioners from a policy standpoint can compare apples to apples, because, and I just repeat that request.
Yeah. And I also want to tell you that, I have a mayor's water advisory board, and part of what they're going to do is review the full universe and listen to presentations and look at everybody's proposal out there,
Yeah,
so
and
that
if-
they can make give me some advice.
There's about 30 options that they reviewed.
Let's just be clear about it when we make the
And
presentation.
again, I think if you've got the long-term questions from the plan you've reviewed, if you can get those in advance, I'll make sure we have those to the consultants so they can answer those, so we can maybe have those answers in preparation.
But that's my primary observation. I want to see the full universe of options.
Because they reviewed about 30 of them, so
Well, whatever they are,
it could be
It's got to be
longer.
3 or 4 of these books. We'll just do 3 or 4 of
It's
the
going to be
books.
3 or 4 of those books, probably 3 or 4 hours, so.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, there was, sure.
Can you just wait for a
Yep.
second? What I'd like to ask is that we not do it in a mayor commission workshop, because, we have other items that we're not even going to get to today.
Do you want a
that,
separate workshop?
Yeah, I'd like to have
Okay, we
a
can do that.
separate workshop, something that's probably more comfortable for the people in the room. So maybe we do it in the chambers.
Okay.
And we carve out enough time so that, we can, I still have a lot of questions still on the short-term drought plan that we're just not going to get to.
Okay,
So I'll save them.
we'll do that.
Okay.
All right, good. All
I
right.
just wanted to add that we did, separate from the long-term plan, we did prepare a summary table that's several pages long that does outline the various alternatives. My understanding was that was distributed, but if not, we can do that. And the reason it's not in the long-term plan is that that's a specific deliverable document to the Water Management District, so we didn't want to mix things in this deliverable document that's for our regulatory purposes. But we've looked at over 30 alternatives. We have them all documented and summarized in a table, so we certainly can provide that to you.
Super. Becky, thank you so much. You did a great job. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Members of the committee, thank you for being here. People from South Florida Water Management District, thank you for your support and help, Bob and Sharon. We appreciate it. Thank you all. Okay.